Number 5. The family jewels. Some things get passed on generation to generation. Some are begged, some are borrowed, and some are stolen. Our first cursed item has made its way across so many seas at the price of many lives. At a whopping 186 carats, the Koh-i-Noor diamond may look precious beyond all belief, but this cursed gemstone has a much darker, unbelievable side too. The name derives from the Persian Hindi words mountain of light. Many theories exist as to its original owner and who was originally cut for. A Hindu description of the diamond warns that, quote, "He who owns this diamond will own the world, but will also know all of its misfortunes. Only God or women can wear it with impunity." Well, that's jarring, to say the least. Right there in writing, huh? Yeah. It passed between the hands of various rulers, blood-soaked era after another, a king who blinded his own son, and a ruler whose head had become encrusted with liquid molten gold was paid for this price. Legend has it that the stone's origins of causing death and misfortune to any male who owns or wears it stems from brothers murdering each other to even sons murdering their fathers over it. But does it actually carry a curse affecting men who wear it? First owned by the emperors of the Mughal Empire in India, it was taken and added with the Timur ruby to make an armband for ruler of the Peacock Empire. The diamond then went to Sikh Maharaja Ranjit Singh. After his death, his 5-year-old son Duleep Singh, the last Maharaja of the Sikh Empire, would be the last male who ever seemed to wear it. Since being owned by the British royal family, and oddly enough, it's only ever been worn by females. After Queen Victoria's death, Queen Alexandra got it and was used to crown her at her coronation in 1902. The diamond was then transferred to Queen Mary's crown in 1911 and finally to the Queen Mother's crown in 1937, where it remained for more than 80 years. When Queen Elizabeth died in 2002, the crown was placed on top of her casket for the funeral. All of the crowns are now on display in the Jewel House at the Tower of London, with crystal replicas of the diamonds set in the older models they were in. So what's the deal? Is this thing still cursed? Did the royal family know something that we didn't? Maybe. Number 4. The statues of Lem. The Women of Lem statue was discovered in Lem, Cyprus in 1878 and dates back to about 3500 BCE. The statue eventually earned the nickname the Goddess of Death after 4 different families experienced tragedy while handling and owning the carved stones. The first owner, Lord Elfont, along with his entire family, perished within 6 years of owning the statue, all from mysterious and rapid illnesses. The other 2 owners, Ivor Minucci and Lord Thompson Noel, also died along with their entire families just a few short years after obtaining the statue within their homes. The 4th owner, Sir Alan Beaverbrook, died alongside his wife and 2 daughters of mysterious causes while in possession of the carved rock. Although his sons did not believe in the curse attached to the statue, out of fear of the sudden misfortunes around them, they decided to gift the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh the find, where it is now encased in glass, safe, unable to bear any other family bad news. You gotta think, someone was just like sitting there back then chiseling this rock like 6,000 years ago. What were they thinking? What were they saying out loud? What were they looking at? Why did they seem to have blessed this rock with so much evil and misfortune? You tell me. Number 3. The mummy. Not actually a mummy, but the mummy board, or coffin, or lid. The board is painted of an unknown high-status woman from the 21st or 22nd dynasty. Timescale for you, that's about 1,000 years BCE. The British Museum's unlucky mummy has earned quite the reputation for causing destruction through its ancient curse. The mummy was found at Thebes in Greece in the late 1800s, and tales of its curse started soon after its discovery. It's said that of the 4 young Englishmen who bought it, 2 died in a shooting accident and 2 died of health problems. A string of illnesses, accidents, and deaths following this are said to be attributed to the lid. One of the most infamous rumors about the mummy's curse is that it caused the sinking of the Titanic. Wait a minute, what? One of the victims on board was a journalist who apparently was the first to publish articles about the mummy's find and the curse that went with it. Survivors from the disaster recall hearing stories about the ship of an ominous artifact that has a sinister reputation. As the mummy stories and the rumors spread, people who survived began to ask the question if the rumors had caused the disaster that night. The unlucky mummy is now an ancient Egyptian artifact in the collection of the British Museum in London. The identity of the original owner is still being studied and the related causes brought on by it. Due to the brief hieroglyphic inscriptions of short religious phrases, scientists are still trying to decipher the name and the curse that comes along with it, and the actual location of where the body disappeared to. It's been feared since the discovery in the late 1880s, and the mummy's lid has acquired a reputation credited with causing death, injury, and large-scale disasters, earning the nickname the unlucky mummy. None of these stories have any basis in fact, of course, but the mummy serves as a spiritual question mark and remains a mystery to scientists who crack the code open. Yo, where's Brendan Fraser when you need him, right? He can figure this whole thing out. Number 2, the haunted bed. Apparently there's a bed that makes you more dizzy and have more sinister evil visions than that of a night on a waterbed. Yeah, I've had a couple hungover nights lost at sea, let me tell you. Gets pretty choppy out there. Highly don't recommend it. But this bed, I also highly don't recommend. The lavishly ornate great bed of ware does not like you sleeping in it. The hardwood oak bed is richly decorated and carved with figures and scenes you could daydream for, well, days over. It's so large that it's rumored to comfortably sleep 4 couples. Yeah. Talk about a California king. There's a tale that suggests that the bed was made in the 15th century for King Edward IV by a very gifted carpenter, but through the years found itself being passed between the inns of ware where commoners were able to sleep in it, break the legs, and apparently cover it head to toe in graffiti. Yeah, the disrespect alone. The defacing got so bad that apparently the ghost of the maker haunts those who are not of royal blood. Basically not blessed by God to rule. It's so old and so haunted that apparently people who spend the night are woken up violently by specters watching them sleep. Apparently there are so many initials carved into the wood, images drawn on it, that it's hard to know who actually the bed was originally fitted for, and who actually cursed it. Some researchers believe that the curse surrounding the bed could have actually been carved into it with symbols and text that hexed the next user. Whatever its history, it's haunted. The bed can now be found in the British galleries of the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. We need like the Long Island medium to take a nap in it, you know what I mean? See what she thinks. And coming in at the number 1 spot, the Terracotta Army. The Terracotta Army was discovered in 1974 by a group of farmers. Yang Zifa, his 5 brothers, and neighbor were digging a well east of the Qin Emperor's tomb mound at Mount Li. For centuries, occasional reports mentioned pieces of terracotta figures and fragments of the Qin necropolis. Roofing tiles, bricks, and masonry were regularly found. But when they discovered heads, Chinese archaeologists started to investigate. To this day, it remains the largest pottery figurine group ever found. The Terracotta Army seemed to be a collection of terracotta sculptures depicting the armies of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. It is a form of funerary art buried with the emperor around 209 BCE with the purpose of protecting the emperor in the afterlife. The figures were discovered in Lingtong County outside Shaanxi, China. The figures vary in height according to their rules, and they're all dressed in different garbs. The tallest, of course, being the generals. These statues include warriors, chariots equipped with horses, more than 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots, 520 horses, and 150 cavalry. Other terracotta non-military figures were found in pits close by, including officials, acrobats, strongmen, and musicians. Yo, are we sure that Medusa didn't just like make her way through China and start stoning people in time with her looks? Because that's like an entire city made out of clay. In the records of the Grand Historian, China's 24 dynastic histories, it was written that work on the mausoleum began in 246 BCE, soon after Emperor Qin ascended the throne. Apparently the project involved 700,000 workers. Yeah, I'd really hope so, because that many perfectly sculpted figures are so realistic, there must have been a city of artists. The site is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site and has been since 1987. This is scary just looking at it. I'm not convinced this was just an art project for the journey between spirit realms. I think this was used as a decoy for battle. 20,000 figurines just chillin' waiting? Seems pretty intimidating to me. Whatever its origins, it's jarring to look at. What do you think?
Number 5 on this list is the Die Book box. This is an evil box that tormented many people and even claimed some lives along the way. Zach Baggins writes, according to Jewish folklore, a diabook is a dark spirit that takes over the bodies of living people and uses them for evil. Legend has it that a diabook can be trapped inside of a box and prevented from causing mischief unless the box is opened, that is. Several years ago, the diabook box came up for sale on eBay. The seller listed a vintage wine cabinet that came from the estate of a woman who survived a World War II concentration camp. The seller, an antique dealer named Kevin Manis, claimed that the first owner's granddaughter was terrified of the box, warning him that her grandmother said it held a diabook. After buying the cabinet, he was plagued by a series of unfortunate events and recurring nightmares of an old hag that would brutally attack him, causing him to wake up with bruises on his body. He also experienced an overpowering stench of cat urine in his home. Tragically, his mother suffered suffered a stroke while opening the box. Not surprisingly, he decided to get rid of it. The box eventually ended up in the hands of Missouri Medical Museum director Jason Haxton, who was skeptical about the powers attributed to the box. He soon changed his mind. After acquiring the box, he began to experience a series of medical maladies, including bleeding eyes and strange rashes. He also began to dream of being attacked by an old hag and would also awake with bruises on his body. Kevin Manis told me that while the box was in Haxton's basement, a man died there and his body was found lying next to the box. He eventually became so unnerved by the box that he reached out to scientists and rabbis who instructed him to build a wooden ark lined with 24 karat gold, place the box inside, and bury it in the ground. Now, this actually wasn't the end of the story for this box. The box was eventually dug up again and then later donated to a museum. This was after it had tormented a few more people, mind you, though. Now it's fully encased in a glass covering, but even that doesn't stop the evil spirit from coming after people. Many people who have visited this box have reported having serious episodes in the room while they're looking at it. Whatever spirit is trapped inside this box, it is clearly an extremely powerful one. The box remains on display at the museum, but I wouldn't recommend going to check it out if I was you. Number 4 on this list is the Devil's Rocking Chair. The Devil's Rocking Chair is actually from one of Ed and Lorraine Warren's most famous case, The Devil Made Me Do It. Zach Baggins writes, the horror began in July 1980 when David Glatzel, 11 years old, became possessed by a demon. One night he woke up screaming, claiming that he had been visited by a man with big black eyes, a thin face with animal features, jagged teeth, pointed ears, horns, and hooves. David was, everyone agreed, not the kind of kid who liked scary movies or who was likely to make things up, and he was visibly shaken up by this experience. He became rather withdrawn and quiet. His older sister, Debbie, asked her fiancé, Arn Johnson, if he would stay with her family for a while and see whether it would help David get out of his depression. Arn, of course, agreed, but things didn't get better. David reported having more nightmares about the terrifying man who promised to take his soul. Odd scratches and bruises began to appear on the boy, and all the injuries seemed to happen while he was asleep. Odd sounds, which Arn couldn't explain, were heard in the attic. Worst of all, David began to claim that he was now seeing the beast while he was awake. He was always seen sitting in the family's rocking chair, which the beast now claimed as his own. David was the only one who saw the beast in the chair, but family members often saw it rocking back and forth, seemingly under its own power. This was obviously a lot, so the Warrens were brought in to perform the exorcism. The exorcism took place in that rocking chair, and it's thought that the chair itself still has some evil energy from this spirit attached to it. Now the chair resides at the Haunted Museum, but owner Zach Baggins actually took the exhibit down because the chair was simply too dangerous, he thought. Number 3 on this list is the Hope Diamond. Don't get me wrong, guys, I would love to have this thing, but I just don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze here. Google Arts and Culture says, one of the most famous diamonds in the world, the Hope Diamond, originated in the Kolar mine in Andhra Pradesh, India. According to legend, the stone is cursed and brings misfortune to anyone who owns it. The curse is said to have come about when the original diamond was stolen from the eye of a statue. The thief met a grisly end, kick-starting a pattern of misfortune for all those who possessed the diamond. Over the years, owners of the Hope Diamond have befallen fates including death by murder, execution, they've taken their own lives, bankruptcy, and imprisonment. Thankfully, the curse seems to have been lifted when the diamond was donated to the Smithsonian in 1958. Now, I don't really buy into the fact that this curse is lifted, in my opinion. Like, literally, if you own this diamond, then you die or someone you love dies. That's what's happened throughout history. In the best possible case scenario, you just get hit with like horrible luck and lose all your money or some other horrible thing. There just really isn't any good way to spin this. Owning the Hope Diamond is pretty much a horrible idea. Number 2 on this list is the Unlucky Mummy. Do not get on a boat if said boat is also carrying this mummy. Google Arts and Culture says the Unlucky Mummy isn't actually a mummy, but the mummy board or coffin lid of a high status woman who lived in around 950 to 900 BCE. Discovered in Thebes in the 1800s, the 4 young Englishmen who first purchased the mummy all died in unfortunate circumstances. circumstances. Rumors of the curse soon spread, and in the early 20th century, journalist William Thomas Steed wrote an article on the jinxed artifact. Steed went on to be one of the passengers on the doomed Titanic. It's said that he told stories of the curse in the run-up to the disaster, with many believing that the mummy itself caused the ship's watery end. Today, the unlucky mummy is on display in the British Museum. The Titanic was supposed to be unsinkable. Enter in the unlucky mummy, and boom, now the unsinkable ship goes down. Maybe it's a stretch to say that this thing caused the literal Titanic crash, but I can at least guarantee that it probably didn't help. At least this thing is now locked up in a museum very much on land and not connected to any boats that I know of. And number 1 on this list is the Hands Resist Him painting. I'm all about having some cool, groundbreaking art, but this painting definitely crosses the line. The lineup says there is no doubt the painting is disturbing. It shows a young boy standing next to a girl doll with hollow eyes and a sad, downturned mouth. The doll is holding a strange device with wires coming out of it. The eeriest part of the painting are the many disembodied children's hands reaching toward the boy through the glass panels of a door just behind him. But even more disturbing than the painting itself are the stories of what has happened to people who come in contact with it. A few years after the painting was sold, the art critic Henry Seldes died. Then the gallery owner died. Then in 1984, John Marley died. The painting disappeared, not surfacing again until 2000 in a bizarre posting on eBay. The new owners were trying to sell it because they said it was haunted. They claimed the boy and the doll in the picture would fight with each other during the night, terrifying their 4-year-old daughter. They set up a motion sensing camera in the room for 3 nights and claimed they had captured the boy in the picture leaving the frame and coming into the room, apparently fleeing in terror. The literal kid in the painting is leaving. Not freaking cool, guys. My paintings are supposed to be static and not moving, and they definitely aren't supposed to be walking around my home scaring the living bejesus out of me and my family. Apparently, this painting is locked up in a storage locker now, and no one is allowed to see it.
At number 5, we have the Stagecraft. This eerie painting was an adaptation of a photograph that was taken by photographer James Kidd. The photo was taken of a wooden car, and when the picture was finally developed, it shows a ghostly figure of a headless man standing on a log to the left of the wagon. The figure's coat, pants, and boots are quite plain and easy to see, but he has no head. The photograph was examined by Kodak and other experts, and it was proved that this photo was not tampered with in any way. In 1994, James Kidd displayed his photo at a gallery in Tombstone, Arizona, and painter Laura, who was also showing off her art at the gallery, saw the Stagecraft photo and was very intrigued. Laura asked James if she could make an oil painting of the photo. He said she could, and she began to work on the 16 by 20 inch oil painting based on the photo. When she was about halfway through completing the painting, she began getting a strange feeling, and Laura thought to herself why she chose that photo to paint, or maybe she shouldn't have even started it, but she did finish it. After completion of the painting, some very strange and unexplainable things began to happen around her home, seemingly centered around that painting. Laura says she doesn't believe in ghosts, but she isn't able to explain how or why these strange things happened. She took the painting to hang it in the office she worked at, and 3 days after doing that, the office called and asked her to come pick up the ghost painting. Every morning, people claimed the painting was crooked. They would straighten it, and the next morning it would be crooked again. Also, appointments were suddenly messed up and papers went missing. People in the office were very afraid of the painting, so Laura took it back to her house. Since she took it home, her and her husband would experience weird occurrences like knocks on the door, but no one was there. Seeing a white hazy figure of a person, a clock which hung on the wall for over 40 years suddenly fell and broke, mysterious leaks in their roof, and even though it was brand new and looked at multiple times by workers who said nothing was wrong with it. Many weird things happened, not only to them but also to friends of theirs who would come over or just look at the photo. Laura claims even after all of these unexplainable experiences, she still doesn't believe in ghosts, but if she could go back, she would never have created the painting. In at number 4, we have the Rain Woman. The Rain Woman was painted in 1996 by a Ukraine artist by the name of Svetlana Telets. One day she began to feel as if someone was always with her, and one day she had the urge to draw, and she believed she captured who was watching over her. During the creation of the painting, she felt that a hand was guiding her during the entire process and had finished the Rain Woman in less than 5 hours. After finishing the painting, it was put on the market and was bought but then quickly brought back which occurred many times by different purchasers of the Rain Woman. The first woman who bought it claimed she couldn't get any sleep and felt someone was beside her even after hiding the painting behind a cupboard. The second purchaser was a young man, and he too couldn't stand to keep the painting. He brought it back to the artist without even taking his money back. The man said he kept dreaming and complained that every night there was a shadow of the woman walking around and he was extremely afraid of it. The third buyer was a male and was completely skeptical of the cursed painting, but he too quickly returned it when he started to see the lady in the painting and her white eyes everywhere. He also claimed to have intense headaches while being in the room with it. It's believed that this painting is possessed by an evil spirit that has been haunting her targets and the creator since the completion of the painting. Apparently, the woman infiltrates targets' homes through a gallery transaction or art purchase. She takes her time to select her preferred target. She simply sits, displayed, and when an appropriate target comes along, they will be inexplicably drawn to the painting and compelled to purchase it. Once she is bought and brought into the home, the targets start to experience sleeplessness, nightmares, general misfortune, conflict with others living in the home, and the feeling of constantly being watched. It is unknown whether the painting is possessed or cursed, but due to so many people experiencing similar things while owning the painting, it's known around the world as one of the most haunted paintings in the world. The painting now hangs in the Venezia Salon, Merchik's furniture on the streets of Kiev. Customers who visit the shop today claim that you can catch the painting smiling or having a glance of anger. In at number 3 we have Crying Boy. The Crying Boy was originally created by Italian painter Giovanni Bragolin in the 1950s and has been mass-produced in alternative versions over the years, all portraits of tearful young boys or girls. In addition to being widely known, certain urban legends attribute a curse to the painting. One major reason for these claims come from a fire that happened in South Yorkshire, England in 1980. The owners of the home, Ron and May Hall, lost nearly everything to the blaze except one item, a painting of the Crying Boy. His wide eyes looking out from the wreckage are not even blackened by the smoke. In September of 1985, British tabloid The Sun published a story about the Crying Boy painting that caused fires, and the story was backed up by a local fire station officer. The officer said these paintings turned up mysteriously unscathed in fires across the UK, all of which started spontaneously. After the story came out, many people got rid of the painting from their home, while others shrugged off the rumours and kept them hung in their homes. These paintings were readily available in stores during the 1950s to 1970s, so many people had one. They appealed to many young couples who wanted to decorate their homes with art. The paintings bear the prominent signature of one Giovanni Bragolin, but for quite some time no one could find information on this mysterious artist and why he paints sad children. One backstory from 2000 was about the boy in the famous Crying Boy painting, who was said to be a street urchin named Don Bonillo, who accidentally started a fire in which his parents died in Spain. From then on, whenever the boy went, a fire followed, giving him the nickname Diablo. Many people throughout England who had owned these paintings had unfortunate events happen to them, often involving fire. The Sun, who did the original story of the cursed painting, told the public to send them their paintings and they will set fire to them and get rid of the curse, and they did just that. They put out an article on Halloween in 1985 with the headline Crying Flame, claiming they dissolved the curse once and for all with a bonfire, burning stacks of these paintings which were all sent in by the public. The bonfire blazed near the River Thames, dissolving the curse into smoke. In at number 2 we have The Hands Resist Him. The Hands Resist Him was created by artist Bill Stoneham in 1972. It shows a young boy and a female doll standing in front of a glass paneled door against which many hands are pressed. According to Bill, the boy is based on a photograph of himself at the age of 5. The doorway is a representation of the dividing line between the current world and the world of fantasy and impossibilities, while the doll is a guide that will escort the boy through it. The hands represent alternative lives or possibilities. This painting became the subject of an urban legend and a viral internet meme in February 2000 when it was posted for sale on eBay, along with a description implying that it was haunted. The painting was first displayed at the Feingarten Gallery in Beverly Hills, California, and was even reviewed by an art critic at the Los Angeles Times. According to Bill, the owner of the gallery and the art critic who reviewed the painting died within 1 year of coming into contact with it. During the show, the painting was purchased by actor John Marley, who had a notable role in the movie The Godfather. After Marley's death, the painting was found at the site of an old brewery by an elderly California couple who kept it until auctioning it on eBay in February 2000. According to the couple, the painting carried some form of a curse. They claimed that the characters in the painting moved during the night and that they would sometimes leave the painting and another room, and the painting had made its way to that room they had just entered. The couple also included a series of photographs they had taken, said to be evidence of an incident in which the the female doll character, threatened the male character with the gun that she was holding, causing him to attempt to leave the painting. A disclaimer was included in the listing absolving the seller from all liability if the painting was purchased. News of the listing ran rapid through the internet, catching lots of attention, and the auction page was viewed over 30,000 times. Some people who had seen the photo of the painting claimed that it made them feel ill or have an unpleasant experience. After an initial bid of $199, the painting eventually received 30 bids and sold for $1,025. The buyer of this cursed painting was the Perception Gallery in Grand Rapids, Michigan. An individual who saw the story of the Hands Resist Him painting contacted Bill Stoneham in 2004 about commissioning a sequel. Bill agreed and actually went on to make 3 more paintings that related to the original, creating a series. On March 15, 2017, the Haunted Museum in Las Vegas announced it had acquired the prequel painting. Bill Stoneham finished the series with his final painting, What Remains, in 2021. And finally, in at number 1, we have The Anguished Man. The Anguished Man is probably one of the most famous cursed paintings of all time. This oil painting is known to be the world's most haunted, not only paintings in the world, but objects, next to the Annabelle doll and the Dybbuk box. This famous painting was created by an unknown artist who mixed the paint with his own blood. The artist was very troubled, and soon after finishing the painting, he took his own life. The Anguished Man is currently owned by Sean Robinson from Cumbria, England. He inherited the painting from his grandmother, who warned him that the painting was cursed. Despite what his grandmother said, the painting fascinated him. So he did take it, but he had to keep it in the basement of his house because his wife didn't like it. In 2010, Sean removed the painting from the basement after a flooding happened and put it in one of the bedrooms of the home. Shortly after moving the painting, Sean and his family started to experience strange happenings around the house, like seeing a shadowy figure of a man and hearing sounds of whispering and crying. The incidents kept happening, haunting each member of the family. At nighttime, Sean would suddenly awake to see a dark, faceless figure standing in his bedroom, and his wife discovered a stranger lying on the bed next to her, leaving her traumatized. The occurrence became dangerous when the couple's son Keenan felt a presence push him down the stairs. In 2011, Sean uploaded a video on YouTube titled Ghost Activity Caught on Tape, Haunted Painting, The Anguished Man, which had gained over 1 million views. The video was recorded for 8 consecutive hours in the bedroom where the painting hung. The video contains footage of the door closing on its own, a loud bang, and sounds of scraping can be heard. Sean continued uploading videos, posting updates about the painting and capturing further paranormal activity in the house, such as distorted sounds and a mysterious ghostly figure running past the camera. To this day, Sean still owns the cursed painting and refuses to destroy it. He keeps it in his basement to avoid any more harm to him and his family. He is currently planning on bringing his story and experiences to the big screen to make a film about the Anguished Man.
Number 5. Uluru Rock. If you're heading down under for a vacation this year, well, there's a certain object that remains very cursed there that people don't really recommend you tamper with. And it's huge. Uluru Rock. Yeah, this massive sandstone monolith in Australia was discovered on paper in 1873 by surveyor William Goss. He named the landmark Ayers Rock in honor of the then Chief Secretary of South Australia, Sir Henry Ayers. Known as such, of course, until 1993, when it was officially renamed to Uluru, honoring the title originally given to the Anangu First Nations peoples, to whom the site is sacred and, more importantly, home. This thing is strange. First off, this place is highly sacred, stumbled upon by the First Nations people of the northern Aussie area for who knows how long. This site has been known over the eons to have strange powers though, i.e. any tampering, stealing, defacing, or slandering the megalith is a sure way to test your luck against, well, the universe. This place shouldn't be messed with. One man stole a chunk of rock from the monument and experienced so much bad luck that he actually drove 3,000 kilometers to return it in person, in an attempt to rid himself of the karma he believed was attached to him. The chip was returned 40 years later. The largest piece of rock that was ever returned back to the site weighed more than 70 pounds. Yeah, this is serious stuff. First off, how the hell did you sneak that off the site? Like, did he just back his truck up to it like, yeah, just chip that big rock off, put it all in. He apparently wrote, "Dear Australia, I am so sorry I took this piece of Uluru. I wanted a piece of Australia to take home with me, and this was the wrong thing to take. I hope Australia can forgive me and welcome me if I ever come back. Signed, an unwise traveler." Yeah, the reason they advise visitors not to take anything is the paranormal omens connected to said rock. Also, this is a giant rock we're looking at, like only 1/10 of its mass you can see. It's like an iceberg. like underground. So before you experience any bad luck, illness, or karma beyond karma any day soon, I'd just collect seashells and skip this whole thing. No? Number 4, the Voynich manuscript. As always, if you like what we do here at Top 5 Scary, make sure to hit that like button down below or comment down below which archaeological find you know of that has impending doom upon the discoverer. I love this stuff. It's scary beyond all belief, but it's interesting. We're all about it here. And speaking of, so apparently there's a giant Italian Renaissance-ish folio called the Voynich manuscript. It's named after Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish-Lithuanian book dealer who purchased it in 1912. Yeah, we don't really know what this thing is. One thing it most certainly is would be the most bizarre and mysterious book of all time. 100%. Not only is it detailed so carefully and patiently, it's all like Tim Burton-like, with an entire world drawn and recorded that isn't ours. Like, is this a parallel universe book? Is this language even known? Like, it's unknown, like predates Latin and doesn't even use phonetic patterns and coding. It's the riddle of all riddles. Written in the 15th century, somewhere they think between 1405 and 1450, all 240 pages are inscribed in some sort of indecipherable language, with a small alphabet only of about 170,000 characters. Yeah, it's gonna take a while for them to crack this one. The contents alone have cursed people mad, with obscure visions and obsessions for years. My precious. Historians and cartographers have tried to crack the code for hundreds of years, yet not one has been successful. Why wasn't this a national treasure movie? I feel like this would have been perfect. Was it written by people from another world? An unknown species? It's so familiar yet so alien. Radiocarbon dating from the University of Arizona proved for all pages tested that once started, the writing was continuous for like 20 years. Protein testing revealed that the parchment was actually skin. About 150 calves slain for this Goliath mystery. It remains at Yale, waiting to be decoded to this day. Creepy! Number 3, metal balls. So, metallic floating shiny balls have been recorded for years. Giant metallic balls like this have been found literally littered around the planet for decades, apparently. Ufologist and professor at Stanford, Gary Nolan, is currently studying these metal Malteser-looking things right now that people have collected and auctioned off since the 50s. Right now in Texas, there's a dude who has a ton of these apparent real alien tech. Jim Marlin, famous music producer, was given these metal giant pinball-looking spheres by a celebrity's bodyguard, apparently, who said that they were dropped from a craft in his backyard in the early 50s. And like, a lot of celebrities have touched these. Dennis Hopper, Jane Fonda, that's Hollywood people. These things are famous on their own. They also move on their own, and apparently hold power and light up once in a while on their own. Yeah. That's not scary at all. Hey dad, after Survivor, can you just move your metal giant floating balls out of the living room? Yeah, mom asked me to ask you. In the 70s, the Betts family of Florida came across a small metal sphere the size of a bowling ball in the woods behind their house. Their first thought was the sphere was an old cannonball from a battle. They decided to take the sphere home, and when the sphere seemed to react to the sound of music in the house, making a throbbing, pulsating noise, later the sphere was even seen rolling on its own and would even stop and change direction in the house. Yeah, that's terrifying. Even the Navy went there and checked out these giant mysterious metal orbs. Every time I'm on Reddit seeing these like light orbs trucking around the skies, I can't help but think, is that them? Like, that's them. One thing's for sure, they don't seem to be made here. Number 2, the Antikythera mechanism. The Antikythera mechanism is an anomaly on its own. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's basically an ancient computer that uses the cosmos to predict astronomical events. Thought to have been the first analog computer ever created, and no, it wasn't made in a garage in 1997 somewhere. It was invented by who knows who, like 2,000 years ago. Captain Dimitrios Kontos and his crew of sea sponge divers discovered the Antikythera shipwreck in early 1900 just off Antikythera in Greece, hence the name. I also find it hilarious that divers diving for something you wipe your butt with found an ancient computer. Like, something about that just amuses me. They recovered tons of artifacts during the expedition, helping pull up the shipwreck and this precious baby. Many thought it was cursed immediately after its first handlings. Apparently after its discovery, 3 of the divers who dove down died shortly after its find. Presumably, of course, of the bends, of overwork, but locals think this device was to blame. At 150 feet deep, just off Point Glyphadia, the Greek island, the team retrieved millions in bronze and marble statues, pottery, glassware, jewelry, coins, coins, and this ancient mechanism. It was a find of a century and still is. The device is made entirely out of a single bronze sheet, built in a wooden case about the size of a shoebox. The case and its faces are covered with Greek inscriptions, which indicate the device's astronomical and calendrical purpose. It's basically a computer built entirely out of cogs, wheels, gears, and faces, and it would tell you where you were amongst the cosmos. The first alarm clock, computer, calendar hybrid. Again, 2200 years ago. Like, no machinery, no watches, no laser cutters, basically everything we have in our iPhones right now within a wooden box 2,000 years ago. Again, it's funny, they were collecting sea sponges to wipe our butts and then stumbled upon a computer. Yeah. You can find it at the National Archaeological Museum of Athens. And number 1, the Codex Gigas. Obviously, this one's gonna be my number 1 pick. Apparently it translates to giant book, and it's big. It weighs about 170 pounds. Yeah, I'm kind of like really uncomfortable what I've learned and read about this book. It's the largest medieval manuscript in the world. The manuscript is also known as the Devil's Bible due to its highly unusual full-page portrait and detail of Satan and the legends surrounding its creation. Illuminated Bibles were a typical feature of Roman monastic books, but even with this one, the page size alone of the Gigas is notably larger for its time, and it's made out of about 180 donkeys. Yeah, sorry. Poor little guys. The most famous myth is that the scribe traded his soul to the Prince of Darkness himself so that he could complete the book in only one night. Everything within the book has been handwritten by a single anonymous person. Created in the early 13th century in the Benedictine monastery of Bohemia, now modern-day Czech Republic, this book holds demonic power. The manuscript contains the complete Bible, Old and New Testaments, as well as all medicinal and cosmological knowledge, all written in Latin, and predated glyphs. However, it is, unbeknownst to any of us, missing 10 pages. Yeah, just ripped out missing. It's like a movie right there. Apparently some think the Codex was created by Herman the Recluse in the Benedictine monastery in the Czech Republic before being stolen and taken to Prague by the Emperor Rudolf II, who, fun fact, also stole the Voynich manuscript at one point. Yeah, this guy loved collecting like cursed, demonic, haunted scriptures, I guess. According to legend, the scribe was a monk who promised to create in one night a book to glorify the monastery forever, including all human knowledge. Near midnight, he became sure that he couldn't complete this task alone, so whipped out his pen and made a deal with Lucifer, asking him to help him finish the book in exchange for his soul. That's not really a good idea. It's thought it would have taken him at least 30 years non-stop writing to complete it. The book lays in the National Library of Sweden in Stockholm, where it is on display for the general public. Dude, I can't read Goosebumps without having nightmares, let alone going near this thing. No.
Number 5 on this list is Long Lost Friend. This book is really interesting because even though there are multiple copies around the world, there's only one particular copy that has a serious curse to it. The book itself was written in 1820 by John George Homan and is basically a collection of spells and other folk remedies that would be very useful if you were running a farm. A lot of the content in the book has to do with healing livestock and casting a spell to have better yields come the harvest. One copy of this book, though, was pretty much directly responsible for the murder of its owner. Orrin Gray writes, while the book itself is intended to be benign, containing as it does wonderful and well-tested remedies and arts for men as well for livestock according to its original German title, the tome took on a rather sinister reputation following the so-called Hex Hollow murder committed by John Blymer, John Curry, and Wilbert Hess. The three men broke into the home of their neighbor Nelson Raymer because they said he'd put a curse on them and they were trying to find his copy of The Long Lost Friend and destroy it in order to end their affliction. Unable to do so, they instead killed Raymer and attempted to burn down his house. Raymer's supposed copy of the book never turned up. After this incident had happened, the men sort of came to their senses and it felt to them as if they'd been under a spell and lost their minds for a little while. People have theorized that the single copy of The Long Lost Friend that Nelson Raymer had owned was cursed, and through its curse had basically set this tragic event in motion. Similar to the One Ring in Lord of the Rings, after it sabotaged its owner, it went into hiding and now no one knows where this book went. Hopefully it stays hidden and the curse it holds is never brought to the light again. Number 4 on this list is The Orphan Story. The Orphan Story is one of the few entries on this list where the subject matter isn't too demonic or troubling in nature. It's, as the title would suggest, a story about an orphan who at 14 years old leaves Spain to go on some adventures. The curse with this book seems to be when someone studies it. The story was written by Martin de Leon Cardenas in the early 1600s, and since then 10 has racked up the death toll for those who've worked on the book. A Peruvian academic, Belinda Palacios, has said, "I laughed it off, but I was a bit apprehensive at the same time. It's taken a while because the people who've worked on it have died, one from a strange disease, one in a car accident, and another of something else." A book that, if you spend extensive time with it, will inevitably lead to your death. No one knows where this curse originally started from. Potentially the author had written something into the book where if somebody spends a long time with the work, they'll eventually suffer a grim fate. Or potentially through the years of its publication, the book has had something sinister happen to it that then caused those who worked on it to suffer greatly. I find it very interesting that this curse only seems to apply to those that study or put great effort into the book. From what I've read, those who just simply read the book for pleasure will be fine. That being said, any book that has the potential to curse me with death is something that I'd like to keep off my reading list. Number 3 on this list is Tomino's Hell. Tomino's Hell is one of the most famous works from the Japanese poet Sajo Yaso, but it's famous for all the wrong reasons. It's not actually a book, so I'm leaving the parameters of this video a little bit, but it is a one-page poem that has dire consequences if read aloud. It was initially released in 1919 and started to gain some popularity because those who read it felt very troubled and uneasy when doing so. The poem's subject matter is very disturbing and graphic, and it's understandable why it would make somebody feel uneasy. It's about a child named Tomino who lived amongst abusive parents and decided to write all of her sorrows into a poem. That poem is found by her parents and they respond by locking her up in a cage and not feeding her. Eventually she dies from disease and malnourishment. So the poem itself is pretty bloody depressing to begin with. Throw on the fact that when you read it out loud you actually get cursed, and now we have one of the most dangerous pieces of writing in the world. Tomino's Hell, if you read out the poem in its entirety out loud, is said to curse you forever. The curse ranges in severity and can come in the form of almost anything. Illness, financial ruin, accidents, death of a loved one, or even death of yourself are all on the potential cards for what might happen if you read this poem out loud. One of the most famous instances of this is filmmaker Suji Terayama, who made a movie based on the poem and then shortly died soon afterwards due to illness. There have been countless others who have suffered similar fates after reading this poem as well. I've actually avoided reading the poem even silently while I was doing this entry and just read people's descriptions on it. For your safety and your family's safety, I recommend that you avoid it as well. Number 2 on this list is Codex Gigas. This book is often referred to as the Devil's Bible, and anything that's called that has to make this list. It's one of the strangest books in the world because even though it's only 320 pages in length, it actually weighs roughly 160 pounds. The origin behind this dark book is widely debated, but the most popular legend includes a Buddhist monk. It's said that in the 16th century, a Buddhist monk broke a promise to his master, and as a punishment, he chose to lock himself in a room and have no food or no water. He spent days in that room writing 310 of the current 320 pages in the book. The last 10 he couldn't finish though, and instead of enlisting the help of someone from our world, he decided to get someone else to help. It was the devil. He called to Lucifer himself, and Lucifer answered his call. The monk died, but Lucifer finished the remaining 10 pages and left his devilish mark on the book forever. The book is now locked up in Vatican City for safekeeping, but it's said that somebody stole those last 10 pages written by the devil, and nobody knows where they are now. What's written in those last 10 pages is also a bit of a mystery. The devil could have written horrible spells in there that could result in awful evil sweeping across the land. He may have also put a curse on those last 10 pages, and those who read it will fall victim to whatever curse he decided to leave behind. Who knows how dangerous this book could actually be? Either way, if you ever stumble upon Codex Gigas, I don't recommend giving it a read. Number 1 on this list is the Grand Grimoire. The Grand Grimoire is considered by some to be the most dangerous book on the planet. The exact date this book was written is unknown, with some estimates putting its first publication in the early 1400s, but other experts saying that it was probably written some 500 years after that. The writer of this book is thought to be Antonio del Rabina, who, other than writing this grimoire, pretty much a complete mystery. The Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon are often on people's most cursed books list, and much of the teachings in the Grand Grimoire was taken from those original texts. This book, the Grand Grimoire, serves only one evil purpose. It teaches someone how to summon and make a pact with the devil. Wikipedia writes, the work is divided into 2 books. The first book contains instructions for summoning a demon and for the construction of tools with which to force the demon to do one's bidding. The second book is further divided into 2 parts, the Sanctum Regnum and Secrets. The Sanctum Regnum contain instructions for making a pact with the demon, allowing one to command the spirit without the tools required in book 1, but at greater risk. Secrets contain simpler spells and rituals one can employ after having performed the ritual in the first book. Some editions contain a short text between those two parts dealing with necromancy. The book describes several demons as well as the rituals to summon them in order to make a pact with them. It also details several spells for winning the lottery, talking to spirits, being loved by a girl, or making oneself invisible. This book is made to be an evil cheat code to life. Something that somebody can use to hack the game and get a leg up at everything. And don't get me wrong, winning the lottery would be a pretty cool superpower to have, but at what cost? How much of my soul am I gonna have to sell to a demon to get that done? How do I know that I'm gonna perform these spells properly? Like, if I'm an amateur, then I could very easily screw something up and fatally injure myself in the process. Also, summoning the devil is never the best idea to begin with either. This book is just far too powerful and far too sinister for humans to have access to.
Our first spot is the Anguished Man painting, a painting that's been said to be haunted by the spirit of its former artist. The Anguished Man was painted by... we have no idea, actually. Fittingly, for something like this, its true origin is a mystery, but it's been said that it was painted with a mixture of the artist's own blood and paint, which explains that delightful crimson hue. The artist disappeared after painting it, and in 30 years, no one has been able to trace its origin to anyone. The earliest recorded history of the Anguished Man comes from a woman in North England who owned the painting after receiving it as a gift, and understood that there was something deeply, deeply wrong with it, but kept it anyway, I guess. After years of having it in her possession, she gave the relic off and passed it on to her grandson, Sean Robinson. Once the painting found its way into Sean's possession, he reported consistent hauntings from it, claiming that at night the painting can be heard screaming, writhing, loud noises, the painting falling off the wall in the middle of the night, and even going so far as to claim that he's seen the canvas itself twisting. Locking the painting in his basement, but feeling a compulsion to keep it locked to study it and possibly keep it safe from the outside world, Sean has recorded several videos of the Anguished Man in action if you feel like you've been getting too much sleep lately. While some skeptics might doubt that the Anguished Man is actually haunted, there is absolutely zero doubt that the painting itself is as fascinating as it is terrifying. Robert the Doll. At first glance already seems a bit unsettling, between his empty smile and the blank expression of the pet sitting on his lap. If only it ended there. Legend has it that this century-old doll is home to a malevolent spirit locked away. It's been said that misfortune comes to those who don't respect him or insult him. Robert's story begins over 100 years ago, and his true origin is somewhat disputed. It's agreed that he was owned by Robert Jean Otto, who received it as a boy, but some people claim that it was a gift from his grandfather, while locals prefer to claim nefariously that the doll was given to Robert by a servant of the house who hexed it out of resentment. Whatever the case, Robert brought trouble with him. The real Robert, or Jean as he went by, would refer to the doll as if it was a living entity, claiming that it had a will of its own. When things around the house would break, like the rest of Jean's toys being destroyed, he'd claim that Robert had done it. The family would find Jean in the middle of the night, wailing, surrounded by overturned furniture, claiming once again that Robert had done it. People would claim to see Robert out of the windows, appearing and disappearing at seemingly random times of day. While Jean no longer owns Robert, of course, Robert lives in the East Martello Museum in Florida, where it's said that even locked up he still causes havoc, causing electronics to malfunction and go haywire. Employees have reported sleepless nights, strange noises, streaks of bad luck after spending time around Robert. The museum claims too Robert gets 1 to 3 letters a day from people asking for forgiveness or asking him to place a curse on others. If you're ever in the area and you feel like checking in, just make sure you're respectful about it, okay? You never know. Number 3, the Delphi Sapphire. The Delphi Sapphire is a seemingly beautiful gem that carries with it a dark legacy. It's also known as the Gem of Sorrow, named for the misfortune it brings upon all those who've owned it. Its first owner was a British cavalryman named Colonel Ferris, who stole the gem from a sacred temple in India in the 18th century. Soon after returning to England, he was plagued with financial destitution, bringing his family to the brink of collapse. Shortly after this, his family all started to develop debilitating diseases. Ferris suspected that the gem was responsible for these wrongdoings, and attempted to pass it off to a family friend who fell gravely ill immediately after taking it in. Shortly after Ferris's friend passed, the gem was bought by Edward Heron Allen, a scientist who similarly experienced his life falling apart after acquiring the gem. In a desperate attempt to free himself of the curse, Edward threw the gem into Regent's Canal, thinking that he'd freed himself of the accursed stone. Sadly, much like the one true ring, this gem wasn't going to stay at the bottom of a river. It was fished out of the canal and quickly sold to a local jeweler, who recognized the stone as one he had mounted onto a ring for a client, one Edward Heron Allen. Thinking he was doing Edward a favor, the jeweler crafted a new ring and returned it to Edward. Isn't that nice? From there on, Edward swiftly tried to rid himself of it again, this time giving it off to a singer, who after a brief ownership, lost her voice entirely and never sang again. With the ring once again in his possession, Edward decided to end the vicious cycle of regifting and lock the sapphire away. He locked it in 7 stacked boxes surrounded by good luck charms and gave it to his bank to store in their vault until his passing, never to be opened, never to be sold. Heron even advised the bank that after his passing, it should be kept for another 33 years, just in case there was any residual curse smell in the box, I guess. Anyway, eventually, the sapphire found its way to a museum, as these things always do, who upon opening the 7 boxes found inside a letter reading, "This sapphire is accursed, and stained with the blood and dishonor of everyone who has ever owned it. Whoever opens this box, do with it what you wish. My advice, however, is to throw it into the sea." Number 2. James Dean's car. Absolutely nothing is cooler than driving a souped up Porsche, and in the 1950s, there was no one cooler than James Dean. Aside from being the cultural face of 1950s teenage delusionment and an icon for outcasts of his day, James Dean had a passion for cars and racing, and had a collection of impeccable Porsches, although the last one he would ever own was a Porsche Spyder 550. It was actually commissioned for Dean, and was one of the first makes of that car produced. A souped up Porsche capable of race speeds, it seemed like the perfect car for a hot-headed rebel. But from the moment he got it, people were wary. A friend of Dean's, actor Alec Guinness, wrote in his diary after meeting James with the car that the sports car looked sinister to me. Exhausted, hungry. I found myself saying in a voice I could hardly recognize, "Please never get in that car. You will be found dead." Normally any friend telling you outright not to get into a car would be worth paying attention to, but I feel like special triple warning should be heeded if it was Obi-Wan Kenobi telling me not to do it. Sure enough, Dean ignored, went ahead and raced the car anyway, leading to a tragic car accident that would claim the actor's life. Shortly thereafter, the Spyder was chopped for parts, where its engine was bought by Dr. William Escrick and installed in his own car. The suspension and transmission of the Spyder was given to Escrick's colleague and fellow doctor and racing enthusiast, Troy McHenry. In a race in 1956, both doctors driving cars with the Porsche's old parts both crashed, leading to the death of McHenry and injuring Escrick. Somehow, not learning any lessons, the self-proclaimed king of customs, George Barris, purchased the mangled wreck of the 550, hoping to rebuild it as a tourist attraction, where it was sold to the National Safety Council as a harrowing display of road safety. In 1959, while in storage, the car spontaneously caught flame. The tires were sold to a private buyer who had them burst on the road, causing them to careen off. And finally, in 1960, while in transit from Miami, the car disappeared entirely. The whereabouts of the car and its pieces are currently unknown, with the only confirmed part left being a transaxle that was found in Massachusetts. And finally, at our number 1 spot, the Devil's Rocking Chair. When we think of a devil sitting atop a throne, our mind isn't likely to conjure up the image of a rocking chair. That's more for kindly old grandparents. But for the Glatzel family, it was all too real. Seemingly an unassuming piece of leisure furniture, this twisted piece of haunted mahogany became the focus of one of America's most notorious exorcisms. In the early 1980s, the young son of the Glatzel family, David Glatzel, claimed that he was being plagued by nightmares of a creature with jagged teeth, twisted horns, and hooves. And the family was worried, as the boy wasn't really the kind to make things up. The boy insisted that he would see this beast sitting in the chair, rocking, watching him, laughing, threatening to steal his soul away. You know, regular old imaginary friend stuff. The visions persisted and even manifested physically, with David waking up in the middle of the night with scratches, bruises, and cuts, as well as red marks around his neck, as if something had been grabbing his throat. He would convulse during the night, and a family member would watch him sleep, as he would have seizures repeatedly. David started to hiss and growl at his family, and even was reported to have spoken tongues, quoting from the Bible. Eventually it became too much for the family to bear, and professional help was brought in from, who else? Ed and Lorraine Warren, who performed multiple exorcisms, and brought in a series of priests to try and quell the spirits inside the house. Lorraine asserts that she saw the chair levitate in her time there. After a final exorcism, it's reported that the demon left young David, but found its way into his sister's fiance, one Arn Johnson. She reported the same growls, hissing, as well as slipping into periodic trances he couldn't be shook from. Tragically, Arn was involved in a conflict that led to the death of his landlord, and when he stood trial for it, insisted that he hadn't acted on it, but rather it was the demon possessing him that made him do it. He was locked away. After these dark events, the chair was kept away in storage, for fear that its evils might seep into the rest of the world. It resides now in the Haunted Museum, owned by Zach Baggins himself, one of the world's foremost experts on the paranormal, and a sort of modern successor to the Warrens, who's indisputably the wisest man to be owning something like this. Let's just hope he's not looking to get comfortable in it anytime soon. Number 5. The Bassano Vase. When we think of cursed objects, we start to go through the classics, you know, haunted dolls, murals, haunted paintings, even the old haunted diamond, you don't tend to think of haunted glassware. Well, let the Pisano vase introduce itself. A seemingly unassuming piece of home decor, this sinister flower pot carries with it a deadly curse and legacy. First crafted in the 15th century, the Pisano vase was given to a bride as a wedding gift in Napoli, Italy. The day of the wedding, the husband couldn't find his betrothed anywhere. Upon returning home, he found her on the floor, clutching the vase. After her funeral, the vase was given out to one of her family members, who then fell ill within days and had passed away. Of course, no one assumed the vase had anything to do with it. Why would it? Despite a suspicious trail already starting to form. The third person to inherit the vase also ended up passing away mysteriously. Well, after the third mysterious death in months, the family contacted a local priest for advice on their situation, and he gave them some reasonable advice. Bury it on hallowed grounds, where no one would find it again. It lay dormant until it was dug up in 1988 by an amateur antique hunter who sold the vase off quickly, restarting the treacherous cycle where it traveled once again, ending lives mysteriously and ruining an otherwise nicely decorated living room. After its revival, it was brought to the attention of local police. They tried to pass it off to museums or cultural sites, but understandably, no one wanted anything to do with the wretched pot. So with nowhere else to turn, legend goes that the police returned it where it had once been found, buried deep beneath hallowed ground. Hopefully a little bit deeper this time. Maybe in a lockbox with 3 padlocks and throw away the keys into the ocean. You know, just to be safe. Are you enjoying yourself, my little ghouls and goblins? Click the subscribe button down below for daily frights from Top 5 Scary. Number 4. The Iceman. The Iceman cometh for us all. In 1991, on the peak of the Otso Alps in Italy, a pair of mountaineering tourists came across what they thought was a deceased hiker, which in a grandiose sense was kind of true. Not a recent passing, however, because the Iceman in question was dated from 3000 BC. The nature of his passing is unknown, so the criminal could still be out there at large. A fascinating find for the scientific community. The Iceman, nicknamed Otzi after the mountain he was found in, shined a light on history previously unseen. Otzi was the oldest body ever discovered with tattoos. History's first bad boy, if you will. After being unearthed, the body was brought to Austria to be studied intensively, but nothing the researchers discovered could have prepared them for the curse that they had unearthed. A worrying amount of people involved in the study of the Iceman found themselves befelled to an ancient unearthed evil. The first man to discover Otzi, one of the hikers, fell off a path on a mountain to his doom. A mountaineer passed in an avalanche. A forensic pathologist was involved in a lethal car accident en route to give a speech at a university about the Iceman. In total, 7 researchers involved in the study of the Iceman and observers found themselves losing their life after meeting him. So where is the Iceman now? Hopefully supervised? Well, Otzi is currently being held in the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology down in the bottom of Italy, where he is kept in a climate-controlled environment to maintain his preservation. Locked away, visitors are permitted to come see the Iceman, but only through a frozen, thick glass window. Is that room to keep him cool and preserved? Or is it to keep whatever curse lay dormant inside his bones docile? All we know is that we're thankful that Otzi's just chillin'. Number 3. The Woman of Lem. Modern art can be a bit confusing. It's hard to understand an artist's true meaning behind their work, especially when things start to get abstract. Looking at the Woman from Lem statue, it's hard to even make out what this is supposed to be. A fertility statue? Primitive bog roll holder? You wouldn't even know just by looking at it just how lethally cursed this statue is. We don't know who crafted this or why, but we do know that under no circumstances whatsoever should you ever touch the Woman of Lem statue, lest you're looking to incur the wrath of a centuries-old evil. The statue was first uncovered in 1878 in Lem, Cyprus, giving the statue its name. Carbon dating suggests the statue was formed around 3000 BC. Hey, wait a minute. Do you think Otzi the Iceman ever saw this statue? You think maybe it's the same curse? Was life just significantly more cursed back then? Now back on hand to the topic. Once the statue was found, it began to wreak havoc almost immediately. Legend says 4 families are purported to have lost someone after touching the statue. The first owner, one Lord Elfont, a lord during Cyprus's time as a colony, lost 7 members of his family after acquiring the statue. Sometime afterwards, the next lord to acquire it, Ivor Minucci, obtained the statue and lost his entire family in the span of 4 years. The next victim, one Lord Thompson Knoll, just like the others, his family passed away within 4 years. The stories say that eventually, his remaining surviving sons, understanding that they had a responsibility to rid themselves of this generational evil, gave the statue off to the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh for safekeeping, or maybe just to pass the curse along like a vicious cycle of regifting. Within a year, the museum curator passed away mysteriously. Right now, it's still kept there, locked away behind a glass box, never to be touched again by human hands. Let's try and keep it that way. Number 2, the Hope Diamond. Now, the Hope Diamond has shown up a few times on this channel before, and for good reason. It's considered one of the most haunted objects on the planet. The diamond was first uncovered in India, with reports claiming that the diamond was plucked from the eye of a statue of the goddess Sita, the goddess of beauty and devotion. Legend has it that the first person who ever stole the diamond was attacked by dogs shortly after taking it. From here, the diamond made its way through countless hands, never staying in one pair of hands for too long though. It's said to have been owned by King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, who as far as I know, never had anything too bad happen to them. You know, at least nothing worth losing your head over. That's a little history joke for you. Look up the French Revolution, or Assassin's Creed Unity. It's the same thing. Throughout the diamond's storied history, it's been said that just about every owner of the Hope Diamond suffered a horrific fate. 14 confirmed deaths and owners throughout history, and that's only the ones we know of, as there could be countless more. The jeweler who recut the stone into its current form, William Falls, died a ruined man in poverty and hardship after his son Hendrik stole the stone from his father, who would later be prompted to take his own life as repentance for his crime. After passing from owner to owner under grisly circumstances, it finally made its way to Harry Winston, an American jeweler who, possibly making the first smart choice of anyone on this list, thought it better to play with his odds, and donated the diamond to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History in 1958, where it currently resides sealed away to this day. So what happened when it became museum property? Well, the curators of the Smithsonian were thrilled to receive it, and have said that they consider the gem a crown jewel of their diamond collection, and that in all the time it's been in their watch, no one has suffered any ill effects, and if anything, visitors have gone up. Maybe Indiana Jones was right. Maybe it belongs in a museum. Number 1, King Tut. Now, number 1 on our list might be a little bit esoteric. It's the curse of King Tutankhamun, so not quite an object, but worth noting. King Tutankhamun, or King Tut as his close friends like to call him, is arguably the most famous pharaoh of all time. Uncovering his tomb was a landmark moment in Egyptology and archaeology, with his tomb serving as something of a golden goose for archaeologist Howard Carter, who spearheaded the excavation attempts of King Tut's tomb. It took years upon years of concentrated efforts hunting for it, but in 1922, Howard Carter, under the commission of Lord Carnarvon, uncovered the late pharaoh's mighty tomb. Howard Carter, Lord Carnarvon, and their companion Evelyn Beauchamp, the daughter of Carnarvon, were the first people to ever step inside King Tutankhamun's resting place in centuries. Unfortunately, it wouldn't go so well for them. The first victim was Lord Carnarvon. Upon entering the tomb, he was bitten by a mosquito, and mere weeks later, the bite became deeply infected, poisoning his blood, leading to a loss of life. The author of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, upon reading this story in the news, had theorized that there was a curse put in place by the old gods watching over Tutankhamun's tomb. And that's the guy who created Sherlock Holmes, so let's assume he's probably pretty smart and doesn't just jump to conclusions. The next victim, George Gould, was a visitor to the tomb who developed an intense fever shortly after walking through it. Within months, he had passed away. Next was A.C. Mace, a digger on the excavation team, passed from an intense case of pneumonia shortly after his involvement. Howard Carter's secretary, Captain Bethel, was the next victim, passing away 6 years after the unearthing under mysterious circumstances, believed to have been smothered in his sleep. Now, Howard Carter, the original excavationist who helmed the venture, didn't believe anything about the curse, claiming that it was all superstition and coincidence, not fitting an educated man. He complained, however, that after unearthing the tomb, whenever he would visit Egypt, he noticed repeated sightings of jackals, the same type of Anubis, the Egyptian god of the dead. Which, I've gotta say, if I recently uncovered a legendary pharaoh and interrupted his slumber to plunder his riches for my personal gain, I would probably be a bit wary about seeing a symbol of the god of the dead following me around. 16 years later, Howard Carter would pass away of Hodgkin's disease. Could he have been the last victim of the curse, or did he manage to escape its throes? The king still rests in his tomb in Cairo, where he shall not be disturbed. You're more than welcome to go visit him if you'd like, but please, be respectful.
Number 5 on this list is Robert the Doll. Robert the Doll is one of the most haunted and cursed dolls on the entire planet. Ghosts and Gravestones says the story of Robert the Doll dates back to the early 1900s when a young boy named Eugene Robert Otto was given a one-of-a-kind handmade doll by a servant that worked for his parents in his home. Eugene, who everybody called Gene, named the doll Robert and quickly became attached to his new friend. friend. The home where Eugene lived, now called the Artist's House, is located at 534 Eaton Street and was built between 1890 and 1898. It was here that Eugene was given Robert the doll, and where a friendship that lasted throughout his lifetime and beyond was forged. While he seemed like an ordinary cloth doll, it wasn't long before Robert was involved in strange and somewhat terrifying events. The first hint that something out of the ordinary was happening was one night when Gene, who was only 10 years old, awoke to find Robert the doll sitting at the end of his bed, staring at him. Moments later, his mother was awakened by his screams for help and the sounds of furniture being overturned in her son's bedroom. Gene cried for help, begging his mother to rescue him. When she was finally able to wrench the locked door open, she saw poor Gene curled up in fear on his bed, his room in shambles, and Robert the doll sitting at the foot of the bed. And all the child could say was Robert did it. Now, this was the first instance where Robert was acting up, but there have been tons of experiences since then where this doll is just doing things that really shouldn't be doing. He now lives in East Martello, where visitors flock to see him, although it's a bad idea. There are letters and notes all around Robert from people that have come to see him, all begging for Robert's forgiveness. Apparently, taking a picture of Robert without his permission will cause him to start to haunt you. This curse has affected hundreds to thousands of people, and they all usually end up coming back to Robert begging for freedom from this curse. At this point, paranormal investigators have learned that messing with Robert really isn't the best idea, and just leaving this doll alone, probably the smartest thing to do. Number 4 on this list is the screaming skull. Last I checked, if there is no meat on the bone, then a skull shouldn't be screaming. That's kind of what's going down with this one extremely haunted skull in Burton Agnes Hall, England. Instablog says, what if you touch an object and then you hear terrible, deafening screams? That is precisely what happens when you touch this skull at an Elizabethan manor in England. Burton Agnes Hall is the house of Catherine Ann Griffith, who was brutally murdered by numerous bullies in 1620. Her skull still rests inside the house. Why? Because whenever somebody tried to take it out of the house, what happened next terrified them to the bone. People who have tried to touch or disturb that skull have reported seeing a scary ghost walk in and utter a deafening scream. This scared the people so much that they actually ran out of the house in terror. If you're up for a scary challenge, then this might be your chance to prove your mettle to the world, but for the weak-hearted ones, it's wise to stay away. And yeah, guys, I mean, I agree with that article right there. Probably best not to mess with this thing. I mean, a bunch of paranormal investigators won't even go here anymore. If a bunch of paranormal investigators think that this area is too scary for them, then sorry guys, I'm tapping out. It's way too scary for me too. Number 3 on this list is the Maori warrior masks. Now, these warrior masks hold a curse that won't affect everyone, just a small portion of people. Specifically, women who are soon to be expecting children. The Occult Museum says New Zealand's Maori warriors are part of an ancient tribe who would carve unique masks when it was time for battle. When a man died in the mask, it was believed that his soul would remain trapped in the mask they were wearing. Although their mythology does not dictate that any harm is done by the trapped souls, the presence of the masks has a strange and sometimes fatal effect on pregnant women. Women who are expecting often experience complications when they come in contact with the masks. It's unknown why this phenomenon occurs, but the museum that holds the remaining masks posts a warning that pregnant women should stay away. The literal museum is out here warning pregnant women not to come. That's how you know that this thing's seriously dangerous. Like, whenever a business or enterprise does something that's actually gonna lose them money, that's when you have my attention. Considering they just lost an entire demographic of people, I'm now listening and buying into this curse. The paranormal investigators who aren't pregnant have taken a look at this, and they're having a hard time getting to the bottom of it. Some people have suggested that the Maori tribe thought that pregnant women were were taboo, but that also doesn't really make any sense because then how would they have repopulated their tribe? Regardless of why it is the way that it is, just know that if you are expecting, that's not the right time to take a look at these masks. Number 2 on this list is the Surrey ghost car. So this is a weird one and definitely something that paranormal investigators are a bit spooked by. List 25 says crashes are common on the A3 highway in England, so it looked like a routine matter when police in Surrey received calls that a car had veered off the A3 with its headlights blazing. But when officers went to investigate, they found no signs of the reported vehicle. However, a further search revealed chilling results. Just 60 feet from the reported crash scene, and buried in twisted undergrowth was the remains of a wrecked car containing a decomposing body of a young man who, as the police estimated, had crashed there 5 months earlier. Therefore, what the witnesses reported might have been a ghostly apparition of the original car. Now, how on earth does that make any sense at all? You know what, let me answer that for you. It doesn't. First off, how did no one notice this car earlier? And then, what was that ghostly apparition that had a car veer off the road? Paranormal investigators are all scared of this one because who knows what type of effect this ghost car could have on your vehicle. And finally, number 1 on this list is the cursed mirror. This mirror isn't just cursed with a bad reflection, it's gonna show you something a lot worse than just you with a little bedhead or something. Instablog says, if you've seen Oculus, then chances are already you're scared of mirrors. And let's not even go back to the time when Bloody Mary was a whole thing. But if these creepy images of mirrors in the horror genre weren't enough, here's a real object which is most likely cursed. In St. Francisville, Louisiana, there's a plantation house which is one of the most haunted houses in America. Inside the house is this mirror, a cursed mirror. Legend goes that the plantation slave brutally killed the owner of the house, named Sarah Woodruff, and her daughters inside the house. Ever since then, they remain trapped inside the mirror. Visitors often report sights of handprints on the mirror, along with some unexplainable strange marks. And the classic haunting is also rumored, figures dressed in white, old-fashioned attire, visible on the other side of the mirror. Some people who have been exposed to this mirror for longer than they should say that these figures in white follow them around too, that they've even seen them appear in other mirrors outside of the plantation, and 1 or 2 of them have talked about how they've seen them outside of a mirror entirely, as if they were standing like right in front of them. It seems like the longer that you're exposed to this, the more of an impact the curse will have on you. Kind of like, I don't know, radiation poisoning or something like that, where the time you spend among the toxin, that's gonna hurt you more. Obviously, because of this, paranormal investigators don't want to spend too long investigating this mirror. A short stint doing some research probably won't hurt you, although it will definitely give you a scare considering you're gonna see the figures on the other side. But extended exposure is where the real danger lies with this cursed item.
Number 5 on this list is the Bassineau vase. The Bassineau vase is one of those old family heirlooms that you really don't want to get passed down to you. It started out as a wedding gift, also something that you really don't want to receive on your wedding day. Anyways, it's a pretty vase, so the couple accepted this vase and then tragedy struck. On the night of the wedding, after the ceremony, the bride was found dead in her room. It's said that she had her hands wrapped around this vase as she was dying, and in her final breaths before passing, vowed to have her revenge. This little vow at the end muddles things because we're not sure whether it was the vow that cursed the vase or if the vase was already cursed, but whatever. Adding it to the story makes it a little bit more interesting, so she cursed the vase. Either way, at this point, nobody realized that the vase had anything to do with the death of the young bride, which is really too bad. The vase turned into a family heirloom and was passed from generation to generation. As you can imagine, it didn't go so great for those who received this. More people kept dying, all of them extremely mysteriously. Eventually, somebody caught on and decided that this vase needed to get locked up for good. For a time, it was locked up in a secret location and nobody knew where this vase was. It should have stayed that way though. The vase in 1988 saw the light of day again and was sold off to a wealthy bidder who basically just bought an extremely expensive way to die. He died very soon after receiving this vase, and thus it began all over again. The vase exchanged hands some more, killing off more and more people as it went. Finally, somebody with some proactive thinking gave it to the police. Now, nobody knows where it ended up. Whether the police destroyed it, hid it, or held onto it is anyone's guess. Number 4 on this list is the chained oak. This one is really interesting, and even though history hasn't necessarily hidden it from us, it's definitely tried to negate the consequences. Atlas Obscura says, the chained oak is an old tree wrapped in chains to prevent its branches from falling. This is due to an alleged curse put on the tree when, in 1821, the 15th Earl of Shrewsbury refused a woman's pleas for money. It's said that she then put a curse upon the nearby oak. For every branch that falls from the tree, a member of the Earl's family would die. Later that night, one of the Earl's relatives died suddenly under mysterious circumstances. Convinced that the curse was true, the Earl ordered that the branches of the oak should be chained up to prevent more from falling. I feel for that Earl's family, man. Like, literally, I'm just a grandkid of this dude, and now if this tree breaks a little bit, I'm gonna die? No thank you. At least the Earl had the sense to chain up the tree and make sure that it won't happen to harm his family. But one big storm rolls through that place and wham, now some random person is just dying. Just pray that you don't happen to be the descendant of this guy, and if you are, cross your fingers those chains were done up tight. Number 3 on this list is the baker's wedding dress. Marriage is supposed to be one of the happiest times of your life. Finding that partner you intend to spend the rest of your life with, and then actually doing just that. Therefore, one of the happiest days of your life should be the day that all of this becomes official. Your wedding day. That's why it's particularly sad when tragedy or drama occurs on the day of said wedding. Just that is exactly what happened with Anna Baker. Scoop Whoop says, inside the Baker Mansion in Altoona, USA is the wedding dress of Anna Baker, who fell in love with an ironworker. Legends claim that Anna eloped from her home to get married to her lover, but her father forcibly brought her back and locked her in her bedroom. She then refused to marry anyone else and spent the rest of her life alone. After her death, the members of the Baker family reported spotting Anna's wedding dress at different places around the house. Some of them even saw the spirit of Anna Baker moving around the house dressed in that same wedding dress. Imagine literally getting forced back home and locked in your room by your father as you're getting married. It's no wonder that Anna was pissed and why this specific object has become very cursed. Now it's locked up in a case and hidden from the world in the Baker Mansion. It's a good thing that it is, because what Scoop Whoop didn't talk about is the fact that this dress can actually be dangerous. As ridiculous as it actually sounds, it has reportedly tried to strangle people in their sleep before. I know that the image of a floating wedding dress trying to suffocate somebody is kind of humorous, but I promise you that you wouldn't be laughing if it happened to you. I like that this thing is locked up, but would be far more comfortable if we just threw it in the fire and we're done with it completely. Number 2 on this list is the Anguished Man painting. The Anguished Man painting is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, a painting of a man in some very clear anguish. The thing is that this man doesn't really look all that human. He hardly has any facial features at all and almost looks a bit like a burn victim. Also, where his eyeballs should be, there's just these 2 gaping holes, and his mouth also looks like one giant hole with no end. Even without the haunting associated with this picture, it's already pretty scary, and I personally have no idea why anyone would want it in their home. That's exactly what Sean Robinson did though, and he quickly suffered the consequences. Scoop Whoop says, fascinated by the charm of the Anguished Man painting, Sean Robinson inherited the painting from his grandmother and decided to hang the painting on the wall of his house. Soon after that, Sean and his family started experiencing paranormal events like cracking of the doors in the middle of the night and sudden blood-curdling screams from nowhere. Sean's wife decided to investigate the origin of the painting and found that the artist who painted the painting killed himself, and before doing that, he mixed his own blood with the paint that he used in making the painting. Learning this, the couple decided to hide the painting in the basement of their house in Cumbria. So the first thing about this story that is kind of questionable is how anybody could be fascinated by the charm of this thing. It's gross and I don't like looking at it, let alone having it hanging in my home. The second thing that's super questionable is why we decided to hide it. I swear, none of these people have ever heard of fire before, guys. Like, great, thank you for hiding it from the world, this is helpful, but what would be even more helpful is if we just took a match and burned it so nobody ever has to deal with it again. I apologize to the artist who painted this thing, but if you're gonna use your own blood and make a haunted painting, then come on, man, kinda deserves to be burned. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Thomas Busby chair. This chair is freaking deadly, man, and even though it's pretty much safe from public use now, I still hate that it exists. Scoop Whoop says, popularly known as Busby's stoop chair, this wooden furniture is cursed by the spirit of Thomas Busby, who was known to ruthlessly murder people. Before getting hanged for his crimes, he requested to have a meal in his favorite local pub. Upon finishing his meal, he stood and said, "May sudden death come to anyone who dares sit on my chair." And ever since then, 63 people who dared to sit on the chair met untimely and terrifying deaths. Later, the owner of the pub donated the chair to the Thirsk Museum UK, and it's still there, hung 1.5 meters off the ground to prevent any further deaths. Can you imagine owning that pub and being like, oh, no worries, 60 people have died in this chair, all is good. Like, how the heck did we allow 63 separate people to sit in this chair and die? And okay, like, I'm happy that it's hanging 1.5 meters off the ground and nobody can sit in it, but guys, come on. This is literally a dangerous weapon that we have right here. The fact that this thing hasn't been totally dismantled is kind of ridiculous. What happens if somebody steals this chair and then decides, you know what, I'm gonna murder people with it without anybody finding out? Frankly, I think history should have hidden this thing a little bit better. Hopefully we don't hear any more murder stories about it from here on out.
Number 5 on this list is SCP-513. SCP-513 is a very rusty cowbell that cannot be cleaned off no matter how hard somebody tries. This cowbell is extremely dangerous and must be locked up, and especially never rung. If this bell is rung, then all those within a 120-foot radius of this ring, they're in for some trouble. The second that you hear this ring, you will become cursed. You may not be aware that you're cursed at first because the early symptoms are simply anxiety and the feeling that someone's watching you, but that stage of the curse goes by fast because within an hour you're gonna start to catch glimpses of SCP-513-1. SCP-513-1 is a very tall and slender humanoid figure that's limbs are far too long for its body. It's kind of similar to Slenderman, but the length of its limbs make it a little bit more unsettling to look at. An hour after this ring, this creature is going to begin appearing. You may see it as you pass by a mirror or as you turn a corner. If you ever make direct eye contact with it, then it's going to vanish just as quickly as it appeared. This curse is going to stay with someone forever, and no one else is going to be able to help you or even see what you're going through. This causes those who are cursed to experience severe sleep deprivation and slowly lose their minds. Many victims will eventually take their own lives because they believe it's the only way out of this walking nightmare. Something that has this ability needs to get locked away forever. Ideally, it should even be destroyed, but considering we can't even get the rust off of it, I would assume it's probably impenetrable. If anyone with ill intentions got a hold of this bell and started ringing it in a crowded area like a city or a mall, then all hell would break loose. If it was up to me, then this thing is getting locked up in the deepest vault possible, and then we're throwing away the key. Number 4 on this list is SCP-572. SCP-572 is a sword. It's not the type of sword that you'd want to use though, because it honestly kind of sucks. The Foundation writes, the weapon is badly balanced for combat use, is made of substandard steel, and does not hold an effective combat edge. So really not the type of weapon that you'd want to take into a fight unless it was your last option. But it's that exact reason why its curse is so dangerous. The Foundation goes on to say, the weapon has the unusual psychotropic quality of convincing any person who holds it of its balance and cutting power, as well as conferring feelings of great strength and invincibility. Basically, if you hold this sword, you automatically start thinking that you're some type of sword god, when really you're just holding a long rusty butter knife. This overconfidence is said to lead people into performing very dangerous stunts with this sword. They'll try to cut a car in half as it's going full speed at them, try and slice a bullet in two as it's being shot at them, attempt to fight actual trained professionals with far more experience and way better weapons. As you can imagine, all of these things don't end very well for those who attempt them. Many people who end up with this sword either end up dying in some gruesome way from their own overconfidence, or at the very least get maimed horribly and barely survive. The worst part about this sword as well is that once you're holding onto it, you refuse to give it up. Kind of like the One Ring from Lord of the Rings, this sword is said to appeal to the holder's greed, and they just refuse to let it go. An item like this is simply too dangerous to be out in the world. It's just one big disaster waiting to happen. Lock it away and keep it there forever. Number 3 on this list is SCP-23071. SCP-23071 is definitely a weird one. It isn't as dangerous as some of the other entries on this list, but it definitely needs to be kept locked away if possible. The Foundation describes it as the remains of a long sword with a 56cm hilt and a partial blade approximately 40 centimeters in length, estimated to be approximately 43% of its original size. Carbon dating has shown that the hilt and crossguard of the sword date to approximately the 4th century CE. However, the metal used in the blade dates to approximately 3.2 billion BCE. SCP-23071 is in a severe state of disrepair as a result of being submerged in water for at least 1,300 years. So once again guys, we're dealing with a sword that really isn't too much to look at all. But similarly to our last sword entry, something very strange happens when somebody touches the hilt of said sword. The Foundation writes SCP-23071's primary anomaly manifests when a subject makes contact with the hilt of the sword. Following this, all records pertaining to the subject will gradually distort in a manner that reflects positively on the subject, giving wildly different accounts of their life over a period of time. It starts slow, but basically over the course of several years, everything that is known about you is going to change. Your birth certificate will be inaccurate, your bank statements will be wrong, your name is going to change. Every single thing that indicates who you are will have changed without you doing anything about it. When you die, your death certificate will be wrong as well. No one will have known who you were or what you did because your whole life story is going to be documented with a bunch of lies. Like I said, it's not the most dangerous on this list, but also something that we don't really need happening to people on the regular. Number 2 on this list is SCP-3008. SCP-3008 may just be the strangest SCP that I've ever come across. There are multiple things that go on with this SCP, but the Foundation's initial description of it is a large retail unit previously owned by and branded as IKEA, a popular furniture retail chain. They go on to write that the inside of the store is a space resembling the inside of an IKEA furniture store, extending far beyond the limits of what could physically be contained within the dimensions of the retail unit. Current measurements indicate an area of at least 10 kilometers squared with no visible external terminators detected in any direction. So this item is actually a massive IKEA store that from the outside looks like a normal IKEA. This SCP gets even weirder though. There are apparently people who are trapped inside this massive SCP who have actually been there long enough to have built settlements and a small society. And these people who are trapped inside this IKEA have to regularly defend themselves against these humanoid entities that resemble IKEA workers but have no facial features and become extremely violent at nighttime. I should also note that it's very difficult to leave the IKEA once you get trapped inside because the exits continually move around the store at unknown times. So if that's not the craziest SCP that you've ever heard of, then I actually don't know what is. But luckily for us, SCP-3008 is currently contained and it has to stay that way. We have no idea how many people are currently trapped inside this IKEA and how many have died in there. If this IKEA was ever not contained and it was just on the street, then one simple trip to go get a new bath curtain could completely change your life forever. Hopefully one day all of the people currently trapped in there can escape, but for now, we need to keep that thing locked up. Number 1 on this list is SCP-666. SCP-666 is a strange one because it's only very dangerous to some individuals. It's described by the Foundation as a medium-sized Tibetan yurt made of tied wooden branches and covered in yak leather. The interior ceiling is 2.44 meters high and the base of the yurt is 9.14 meters. The hut is circular in shape. The interior of the yurt has a dirt floor and appears to be as crude as the outside to the majority of observers. The branches that make up the yurt frame are wrapped in rabbit fur and tied with yak leather thongs. So basically we just have a standard yurt. For many people this yurt will cause no problems at all and one can stay in it as long as they like. However, if someone who has or has had a substance abuse problem goes into the yurt, then some very bad things will happen. SCP-6661 is an entity that is said to appear to those who've dealt with substance abuse problems. This entity will attempt to get that individual to give into their past vices and get them to once again take whatever substance they had a problem with. The person who's in the yurt also can't simply leave because the second they get in there, the whole environment changes to something else. If the person gives into this entity and does take said substance, then the entity gets very violent and often leads to that person's death. This whole thing is really scary and it's really wrong. It seems like this demon creature wants to incite chaos and cause harm to this select group of people. Currently, SCP-666 is contained, and similar to the IKEA, it has to stay that way. Number 5 on this list is SCP-028. SCP-028 is hard to describe because it doesn't have any distinguishable qualities to it. It's located directly in the center of an abandoned storage yard, so one could make an argument that the center pocket of air is the item in question or that the entire storage yard is the problem. Either way, this thing definitely needs to get locked up forever. The Foundation writes, subjects entering SCP-028 are, within 3 to 6 seconds, struck by total and complete knowledge of a subject. This knowledge is thus far completely random in both size and usefulness, and sometimes goes unnoticed for extended periods of time. More profound knowledge generally has a stronger effect with some cases. This effect can be experienced multiple times by exiting and re-entering SCP-028, but can result in increasingly strong migraines and dizziness after 2 exposures. Now, you're probably thinking that this is freaking awesome and something that we should use to our advantage, but the problem is you don't get to decide what knowledge you attain. The Foundation did a few experiments with this thing and documented them. In one of those experiments, they say that the subject began to cry and went into a fetal position, showing signs of high distress. Unresponsive to questioning and outside stimulus for several days. Lapsed into catatonia shortly after stating that this is not life. Subject passed into a coma and died shortly after. Cause of death was attributed to shock. So that's kind of the big problem with something like this, guys. Learning everything about something sounds great in theory, but in practice might be too much for us to handle. We aren't omniscient beings, and potentially our bodies weren't made to be able to become omniscient beings. This is just one of those things that we aren't ready for yet. So for now, I say we gotta lock it up and not mess with it. Number 4 on this list is SCP-846. SCP-846 is honestly pretty cute. The Foundation writes, SCP-846 is a plastic toy robot measuring 20 centimeters in height and 5 centimeters in width. The bottom of SCP-846's right foot bears the text Robo Dude, now with voice command action, by Dr. Wondertainment. Signs of paint chipping and minor damage to SCP-846 indicate that it's roughly 10 years old, although attempts to question SCP-846 on this have been ignored. So it's just a tiny little robot. How much harm can this thing cause? Answer: a lot. First off, when this thing is turned on, it appears to be so well programmed that some people think it's sentient. That hasn't been confirmed, but it responds very well to any question that's asked of it. Second, and most importantly, it has 350 robo-accessories. Okay, so what? A robo-accessory doesn't sound so bad. Well, how about if that robo-accessory is an atomic grenade? Flamethrowers, hydrogen guns, laser beams, you name it, this robot carries it. All you need to do is ask it to utilize one of its robo-accessories, and then out from its stomach pops whichever one you've requested. This tiny kid's toy is basically the world's largest and most advanced armory in the entire world. It has weapons that we're not even close to being able to comprehend, which are so powerful that they could literally end the world. If this toy was to end up in the wrong hands, then we might all be done for. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that whoever owns this robot could easily take over the world too. If you could threaten the use of an atomic grenade whenever you wanted, then you automatically become very powerful. Lock it away and throw away the key. Or honestly, better yet, maybe just destroy it. Number 3 on this list is SCP-155. SCP-155 is described by the Foundation as a complex electronic construct consisting of highly modified Cray CS6400 supercomputer, a dedicated radioisotope thermoelectric generator, and a device that has yet to be fully reverse engineered. SCP-155 was recovered from the basement of Prometheus's lab primary research laboratory by elements of Mobile Task Force MU-4 following the destruction of the facility and subsequent Foundation intervention. When a program and accompanying data is loaded into SCP-155 and executed, SCP-155 generates a spherical temporal distortion field with a radius of approximately 5 meters. Within this sphere of influence, the passage of time is rapidly accelerated, resulting in a hyperbolic increase in the effective processing power of SCP-155. Execution begins slowly as the processing hardware of SCP-155 is dated, but its effective processing power approaches infinity after approximately 8 minutes and 14 seconds of execution. From fragments of documentation recovered by Prometheus's lab, SCP-155 was used to perform massive calculation jobs that would have taken months, if not years, of processing time with conventional computing devices. So once again, guys, we are dealing with something that actually sounds incredible. A processor that is so fast it could change the way our world is run. However, as I'm sure you're guessing, there's a catch. The catch is that when this thing is used, it generates some radiation. A lot of radiation. The longer it processes, the more radiation is generated, and this can reach incredibly dangerous levels. It's even thought that if this thing was left processing for too long, then we could cause some world-ending scenarios. A processor that is so fast and smart, but also capable of totally changing our world's climate and killing all of us in the process. As tempting as it would be to use this thing and advance tons of stuff, it just isn't worth the risk. At the end of the day, our planet is the most important thing that we have. We have to protect it, and in this case, it means locking this thing up for good. Number 2 on this list is SCP-310. SCP-310 is extremely dangerous and needs to stay locked away forever. It's just a tall white candle, nothing too intimidating on the surface. The flame on the candle isn't too big either, but it never goes out. Unless it's immersed in water or some other substance to inhibit the flame, this flame will always go. Even if you put it in water and then take it out, the flame will immediately reappear as if it was always there and never went out at all. This isn't too dangerous, just don't burn yourself on the candle. The problem is how this flame interacts with other flammable objects. The Foundation writes, any flammable or semi-flammable substance which comes into contact with SCP-310 becomes ignited with a slow-spreading fire. Unlike the flame of SCP-310, this fire cannot be extinguished by any known means other than exhausting its fuel supply. Experiments have shown that the fire will continue to burn even in a vacuum, underwater, in a nitrogen-saturated environment, under intense airflow, in a refrigerated environment, encased in a fire retardant covering, or any combination of the above. Only total consumption of all flammable material in contact with the flames will result in them becoming extinguished. Therefore, in the case of accidental ignition, especially of personnel, separating the lit section from the rest of the object as soon as possible is the only way to preserve the rest of the exposed object. So that means that once something gets lit with this flame, it's not gonna stop until it's completely destroyed. Think about how horrible that could be to society. You could burn down entire cities, maybe even countries to the ground with this one tiny little candle. Obviously, for this reason, it needs to be locked up forever, preferably in some water containment facility to prevent any accidents from potentially taking place. Number 1 on this list is SCP-173. Guys, I hate this SCP so much, just researching it gave me shivers. The Foundation says that it is constructed from concrete and rebar with traces of Krylon brand spray paint. SCP-173 is animate and extremely hostile. The object cannot move while within a direct line of sight. Line of sight must not be broken at any time with SCP-173. Personnel assigned to enter container are instructed to alert one another before blinking. Object is reported to attack by snapping the neck at the base of the skull or by strangulation. In the event of an attack, personnel are to observe Class 4 hazardous object containment procedures. They also go on to say that this thing excretes this reddish-brown liquid, which is apparently a mixture of feces and blood. So first off, this thing is absolutely disgusting. It literally sweats bloody poop and also looks like something picked straight out of hell. Second, the way it kills you is just terrifying. You literally can't ever stop looking directly at it. Directly at this gross creature that wants to murder you. If you blink, you die. If you lose focus for 1 second and you look anywhere else, you die. Honestly, I don't think that this thing needs to be locked up at all, it just needs to be flat out destroyed. If it was up to me, then I'd take SCP-310, the candle that we just talked about, and light this thing on fire so the only thing it can do is burn to death. There's no reason why we should keep this thing around. The only thing it's capable of doing is stinking up a room and killing people. Burn it with fire, and let's be done with it.